June 11th, 1962, the San Francisco Bay, 3 in the morning. The water is 42 degrees and the current runs hard enough to swallow a man whole. And somewhere out there, 3 convicts are either swimming for their lives or already dead. No one knows which. That's the thing about this story. More than 60 years have passed. The FBI spent 17 years chasing ghosts. The U.S. Marshals Service never stopped. And the truth, the real, final, definitive truth, has never been told. Because Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin simply vanished. To understand why that's extraordinary, you have to understand where they escaped from. Alcatraz, the island, the myth. It sits in the middle of San Francisco Bay like a dare. A slab of rock 1¼ miles from the shore of one of America's most beautiful cities. You could see the lights from your cell. On clear nights, you could hear music drifting off the waterfront. Freedom was right there. And it was completely unreachable. That was the whole point. The federal government opened Alcatraz as a maximum security penitentiary in 1934. It was built for the inmates no other prison could handle. The escape artists, the ringleaders, the incorrigibles. Al Capone did time here. Machine Gun Kelly did time here. The men who ran the prison believed that the cold water, the currents, and the sheer isolation made escape not just difficult, but physically impossible. In 29 years of operation, 23 separate escape attempts were recorded. 36 men tried, 23 were caught, 6 were shot and killed, 2 drowned, and 5 were listed as missing, presumed dead. Nobody made it. Nobody was ever confirmed to have survived until June of 1962, when 3 men bet their lives on a plan that had been more than a year in the making. Frank Morris was the mastermind. He had an IQ of 133, genius level, and a criminal record that started when he was 13 years old. By the time he arrived at Alcatraz in 1960, he had escaped from custody 4 times. The warden knew exactly who he was dealing with. The Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, had grown up poor in rural Georgia, the sons of a migrant farming family with 13 children. They'd robbed banks together, been caught together, and now they were doing federal time together, housed just doors down from Morris on B Block. They were loyal to each other above everything, and when Morris brought them his plan, they were in. There was a 4th man, too, Alan West. He helped design the plan, but on the night it mattered, he couldn't get out. His preparation had fallen short. He was left behind, and he spent the rest of his life at the mercy of what the others had done without him. He later told investigators everything. What Morris and the Anglin brothers had done was nothing short of brilliant. For months, quietly, patiently, invisibly, they had been digging. The walls of their cells were made of a concrete mixture that contained a high proportion of seashell aggregate, which had degraded badly over the decades from salt air and moisture. Using improvised tools, a sharpened spoon, a metal nail clipper, anything with an edge, they chipped away at the ventilation grills at the base of their cell walls, working only during the nightly music hour when the sounds of harmonicas and guitars and accordions masked the scraping. They made dummy heads, real ones, sculpted from soap, toilet paper, and real human hair collected from the prison barbershop. They painted them with flesh-toned paint they'd stolen from the maintenance shop. At night, they propped these decoys in their bunks, pillowcases arranged just so, covers pulled up. For months, guards doing hourly rounds were checking the dummies and walking away satisfied. They built life vests and a raft from more than 50 stolen raincoats, vulcanized together with heat from the steam pipes running behind the walls. They inflated it by mouth. The raft was roughly 6 feet long. It was meant to carry 3 men across a bay that had already killed swimmers who attempted the crossing in daylight, in warm weather and good health. On the night of June 11th, Morris and the Anglin brothers made their move. They squeezed through the ventilation holes, climbed a utility corridor behind the cell block, scaled 50 feet of pipes to the roof, crossed to the north side of the building, and descended to the ground. They carried their raft and their paddles, fashioned from plywood and scavenged wood, and they moved through the darkness to the water's edge. Then they went in. The next morning, a guard walked the cell block at 7:15 a.m. and noticed something was wrong. Frank Morris's face was too still. He reached into the bunk and his hand went through papier-mâché. The alarms went off. The island was searched. The bay was searched. The Coast Guard was called. FBI agents were on the island by midday.
What they found, a homemade paddle, pieces of rubber raincoat material floating near Angel Island to the north, a plastic bag containing personal effects belonging to one of the Anglin brothers, letters, family photos, addresses, washed ashore. And then, over the following days, one of the improvised life vests. What they did not find: bodies. No survivors, no confirmed sightings, nothing. The official conclusion, reached after exhaustive investigation, was that the three men almost certainly drowned. The water temperature, the strength of the current, the tide charts for that particular night, all of it suggested that even if the raft held, the men would have been swept past the Marin headlands and into the open Pacific. That's the logical answer. That's the probable answer. But it has never been proven. In 2013, the U.S. Marshals Service, which maintains jurisdiction over the case because it has never been officially closed, released a study arguing that the tidal conditions on the night of June 11th may actually have been navigable, and that a sufficiently strong swimmer in the right direction could have made landfall somewhere north of San Francisco in the early morning hours. That same year, a letter surfaced. It was addressed to the San Francisco Police Department. The handwriting matched that of John Anglin. The letter, if authentic, claimed that all three men had made it out alive, that two of them, the brothers, were sick and aging, and that John was reaching out to request immunity in exchange for turning himself in. No immunity was offered. No one came forward. The FBI later assessed the letter but couldn't definitively confirm its authenticity. And then there's the photograph. Family members of the Anglin brothers came forward with a photo taken in Brazil, allegedly in 1975. Two men in the image, older, changed, but with the bone structure, the ears, the jawlines that Anglin family members swore they recognized. Enhanced analysis by forensic specialists produced inconclusive results. Possible matches, not confirmed ones. The Anglin family always believed the brothers made it. They spoke about receiving Christmas cards, unsigned with no return address for years after the escape. They described brief, whispered phone calls. They were never able to prove any of it. The FBI officially closed its investigation in 1979 after determining the men were most likely dead. The U.S. Marshals Service has kept it open ever since, and as of today, it remains one of the longest-running active investigations in American federal history. Former prisoners who knew Morris talked about a man who planned everything down to the inch, who never acted without thinking 3 steps ahead, who had studied the currents, mapped the tides, and chosen the date deliberately. They believed, without exception, that if any man could have survived that water, it was Frank Morris. Alcatraz closed in 1963, just months after the escape. Budget issues and infrastructure problems were cited, but the escape had done something to the island's reputation that could never quite be undone. The myth of the impenetrable prison had developed a crack, and through that crack, 3 men had walked out and never looked back. Today, Alcatraz is a national park. More than 1 million people visit it every year. They walk the same corridors. They stand in the cells. They look at the dummy heads and the actual original dummy heads preserved behind glass, and they try to imagine it. The patience, the months of scraping in the dark, the moment of decision at the water's edge. They stand in Frank Morris's old cell, and they look at the hole in the wall still there after 6 decades, and they think, he did it. Maybe he lived. Maybe he drowned in that cold, black water before the sun came up. Maybe the raft fell apart 200 yards from the island, and 3 men went down quietly, without witnesses, without a trace, in the middle of one of the most heavily trafficked bays in the United States. We may never know. What we know for certain is this: 3 men walked into that water carrying nothing but a raft made of stolen raincoats and a decision to be free. And the world never saw them again. Every case has an answer. Somewhere, buried in time, is the truth about what happened in the dark water of San Francisco Bay on the night of June 11th, 1962. The Rock kept its secrets, and so did they.